Welcome to this tutorial on self-directed learning. Today we're going to look at what is self-directed learning and how do we make the most of it. We're going to talk about how you can drive your own development with self-directed learning. So what is self-directed learning? It's adults controlling their own learning process, or to say it another way, it's learning in which the decision around what to learn, how to learn it, and how to decide if one has learned something well enough are all in the hands of the learner. So what does self-directed learning look like? Let's see what it looks like if we think of learning as a trip. Learning is like taking a trip. So you're going from here, what you know now, to there, the learning destination, or what you need or want to know. Someone needs to set the destination, think about learning goals, what skills you're going to learn. Someone also needs to pack for the trip. So think about the resources, what will be useful in helping you learn this skill. Someone needs to plan out the first few miles, thinking about the initial actions. What are the first things you're going to do to start this learning? Someone also needs to decide when to check the map. By that, I mean have some check-ins. Ask yourself how this learning is going so far and what can improve. Whenever we're going somewhere, we probably want to stop and check in, right? Someone also needs to know or decide when you've arrived. We're talking here about the evaluation. So have you reached your learning goal? How do you know that you have arrived at that goal that you set? Someone also, and finally, needs to decide when to keep going. So should you be continuing this learning? Should you be developing this skill even further? Now that we know this self-directed learning trip, what it looks like, let's look about. Now that we know what self-directed learning looks like as a trip, let's look at how self-directed learning can be different from other kinds of learning. The learning that you're used to is probably not like this self-directed learning. The trip of learning looks different. So when we talk about classes, trainings, and workshops, you can think about that as a bus driver and a bus company, right? You're riding along in the bus, but the bus driver and the bus company are leading the process. So they set the destination for the group. They decide what they're going to do in this class, in this training, in this workshop. They limit what you can pack for the trip, right? They say, these are your resources. These, no, not quite or not yet. They pack it up for you and decide when to bring it out. Here we have a resource on this. Now we have a resource on that. So they're deciding what's going to be useful in helping you get there. They plan out the first few miles. Where are you going to go when you pull out of the parking lot? They decide when to check the map and when to take a break based on what they know and probably what their own needs are, not maybe thinking as much about when you might need to take a break and check the map. They tell you when you've arrived. They say, okay, the bus stops here. And they say at which point you can either stay there, or if you want to keep going, you find a different bus, right? They decide, they do the evaluation. You have reached your learning goal, you continue, or you don't. Maybe the most challenging part is they decide whether or not you get on the bus. That first bus, that second bus, they decide when the bus moves. So you can only go if or when there's an additional training, an additional workshop, and if there's a spot for you. Tutoring is a bit the same. So tutoring and teaching, you're in the car, but someone else is driving it, right? That driver is setting the destination for the both of you. I'm going to tutor you or teach you this. They set the learning goals. They say, okay, we think you need to learn this. They probably limit what you can pack, and they pack it for you, saying these are the resources you can use for learning, and no, these resources not yet. They plan out the first few miles, those initial actions of the learning. They decide when to check the map, or maybe they decide when to ask you to check the map. So these check-ins on how your learning is going, they are in charge of starting that process. And they tell you when you've arrived. And so you're there, you're left to figure out what to do now that you're there. Sometimes it's the end of a tutoring engagement, the end of a class. They decide when to keep going. Maybe there's another leg of the journey in the same direction. They have another class, or they can do more tutoring on this subject. Maybe they decide that they want to support you in another subject. They drive the process. They are the drivers of the car on your learning trip. In self-directed learning, it's different. So you're not doing it alone, but you are definitely driving. You are reaching out to others instead of them reaching out to you. Others can help you figure out what to do, but you are in the driver's seat. So let's talk more about what that looks like. Before we dive into the details, it's probably important to think about why self-directed learning is so valuable. Well, self-directed learning is always available to you. These formal, externally led learning opportunities like tutoring, trainings, degree programs, those are rare. They're not always exactly what you need when you need it, and oftentimes they don't match up in terms of the time, the place, and the funding. You want to go to that workshop? It has to be a place you can get to it. It has to be affordable. It has to be in the right time so that you can go. Self-directed learning, no. Self-directed learning is also best tailored to your needs because you're driving the process. You know best what you need to learn to do your job. For example, these days I'm needing to learn more about how to make videos and how to add subtitles. I know what I need in this moment. Self-directed learning is also integrated with your work. You can't always stop working to learn and then stop learning to work. So self-directed learning helps you entwine your learning and your working together. You're learning something and you're figuring out how to tie it to your daily tasks. You're struggling in something in work and you make a conscious decision to learn more about it and then to apply it back. All of the learning that you do is more specifically relevant to what you do. So there's going to be more of a chance to both learn it and to apply it immediately as you continue working. Self-directed learning is also flexible, agile, and immediate. So it's what you need to learn for your work. And that will change routinely. Me and the videos and the subtitles, for example. So being able to identify what you need to learn and then drive your learning toward that goal will mean that your skills are agile. You will be learning what you need when you need it, and we need to recognize that that changes quite often. With self-directed learning, you see that coming, you're proactive, you're reactive, but you're not waiting around for someone to catch you up. You are driving that own car on your learning trip to your learning destination. That's all great, but how do you set yourself up for successful self-directed learning? It changes a bit in that you are the one who sets the destination. You are the one who sets your learning goals, asking yourself, what do you want to learn? What do you need to learn? And in fact, your destination setting starts with your IDEP. With your IDEP, you're identifying and setting clear, specific, and attainable goals. You're not trying to master an entire huge skill set, but you are trying to drill down into the skills that will be most useful for you in your job at this moment. You are also the one who packs for the trip. So you are deciding on, or at least leading the process to find resources. You are looking at what and who, we often forget the who, so what and who do you think will be useful in helping you get there? This is often one of the most challenging parts of self-directed learning. If I don't know the skill, how am I supposed to know what resources will help me learn the skill? Well, let's talk about that. You can ask yourself too, which of these resources have you identified already, and which might you need help identifying? Even though you're driving the car, others can help you in the process. They can jump in, they can ask you where you're going, they can clarify things with you and for you, so you can ask them. You also want to ask, which resources do you already have access to, and which might you need help in getting access to? Be that a document, a course, a person. You're driving the process, but you can reach out and should reach out for help. Your packing also starts with your IDEP. We're asking you to identify resources in your IDEP so you know where to start. And your IDEP should be completed, drafted, given feedback, and finalized as much as it can be for the quarter with the help of your TU lead. So you can write down some resources and your TU lead can also add resources that they know of. And this isn't a static process. When you go through your IDEP for the first time, you should also be going back and seeing what are the resources I need now and how do I get them. Where can you look for resources? This is the big question. Well, there are 4 main places to look for resources, all with their different types of resources, a different ease of use. I'm sure you've used some of them before, others maybe you've used less. The TCB Library, a great place to get resources for the skills you are targeting in your IDEP. The library is put together by PMA. MOOCs, massive open online courses, these online classes that people can take regardless of time and geography. You can join this online class. Google, we all use it. We could probably all use it more. Google's a great place to look for resources when you're learning any skill. And also YouTube. Some of us don't learn as well when we're reading a document. We really learn when we see it. And so YouTube is a great place to look for learning resources. The first place we're going to talk about is the TCB Library, which is available at bit.ly/ MOOCs are also great places to learn any of these skills, but in general, they're good for more general skill sets. Or if you already have a course recommendation from someone who really knows what you want to learn and knows the skill well, because there are so many MOOCs out there, you probably want to look around a bit, ask around a bit to understand that you are taking the right course for that MOOC. So there are many different platforms for massive open online courses, MOOCs. edX is one run by Harvard. The Khan Academy, started by a single man teaching his nephew. Open Education Europa, which also has some great French courses. And then 3 that have been commercialized in the past few years. So they're great. They also have mostly fee-based courses. So Coursera, Udemy, and Udacity also have handfuls of courses for you to learn. How do you select a course? It's good to look at cost, quality, logistics, and level. So as I'd mentioned, some MOOCs are free and some have a cost. Some are free, but you would have to pay for a certificate at the end. And some have free trials that will give you a free course or that will give you free access for a week or a month. So check on the cost of the courses when you're searching. Quality as well is important. Anyone can publish a MOOC, so don't just assume that because it's a course online, it's a high quality course. Make sure that it seems quality. When you have doubts, reach out to someone who knows MOOCs better, maybe who knows the skill better, to tell you, yeah, this is a good course, or maybe not such a great course. Look at the logistics as well. Make sure that the MOOC that you're looking at meets your logistical needs, that you can access the materials with your internet connection, that any type of video might stream, that you can download anything the course asks you to download. Also check that your time commitment is reasonable. So sometimes a MOOC will ask you to do 10-15 hours of work a week. If so, and you're working full-time, that might be challenging for you. Many MOOCs are also shorter. They're 1-2 hours a week or 1-2 hours total. And finally, check to make sure that the MOOC is not live. If you have the time to make a commitment for live classes, great. Most of us don't. So think about if it's a deferred MOOC that you need to do an assignment for the day or for the week, but at any time of that day or week, that's probably better suited for you. And finally, check on the level. Make sure that the MOOC meets your learning needs, that it starts at your level, and that it teaches the appropriate skills. Try the MOOC out. See if it works. Feel free to just drop it if you feel like it's not at the right skill level, the time commitment is too much, the quality just isn't there. Try it out and drop it. Also, it's really key to ask for recommendations. You can find so many of these MOOCs, but you might have a colleague or a connection through PMA or another professional circle who might have already done a MOOC, and you might want to follow that. Finally, think about taking the class with a buddy. It is proven that more people complete these online classes, these MOOCs, when they take the class with someone else. Looking at YouTube, there are so many videos on YouTube. For the work that you do with PMA, YouTube is probably good for general introductions to ideas and also for learning or troubleshooting specific skills. It's less structured than a course. It's probably less about getting from knowing nothing to getting to knowing a bit, but it helps with the basics. It helps further up. So think about when you might use YouTube. Again, anyone can post on YouTube. This video might go up on YouTube. So think about when you're selecting a video, how to select the best video for your learning needs. Think about which video seems to be at your level based on the title and the description. Check out the number of views. Check out the date. The older videos are more likely to use old technology. So think about if you want to learn Stata, are you learning the most recent Stata? If you want to do something in Python or in ODK, are you really getting the best, greatest, most efficient, most recent way of doing things? Check that date. And finally, remember that most videos are short. Granted, some are longer, like this one, but most videos can be 1 to 5 minutes, maybe 10. So think about just taking the risk of watching one or watching a part of one. If it's not helpful, okay, then stop it. But maybe there's something in there that might help you with your learning goals. So if we go to youtube.com, let's say we want to learn about ArcGIS basics. We type that in, and already YouTube gives us different suggestions of what we might be interested in. We could click on any of those. But if we look at the full search results, you can see that we have many different videos that talk about ArcGIS basics, ArcGIS basic tools for beginners, which is a quick 10-minute video, for example, with 3,500 views. We can also look at a different series, right? So here we have ArcGIS for beginners, and there are 69 different videos. We don't know if they're good yet, but we can click on them and start to go through. We can look again, remember, for the dates and for the number of hits and for the levels. Maybe this GIS Fundamentals course might be interesting to us. It has 35,000 views, but it's from 6 years ago, so it might be using outdated ArcGIS versions. Many different options come up, so it's up to you to click through to see what's a bit more recent and still enjoyed by many, and to just start watching the video. You can skip around, see if it gets to things that are useful for you, and at any time, if it doesn't seem useful anymore, stop and search again. But what if it's not the basics that we're looking for? We want to really go into the way that we'll be using ArcGIS in our work with PMA. So there's one skill in the IDEP that is ArcGIS for GPS data processing. Remember, PMA will do it a certain way, and there are SOPs, there are memos, there are manuals and guidelines for that, but you still need to learn the basic skill. So here we learn about importing and exporting GPS data in ArcGIS. There's a video about GPS data processing by someone who does GPS surveying, looking at adding a GPX file into ArcGIS, all sorts of things. Maybe we want to think about how to use Stata in this process, creating maps in Stata, using GPS and bringing the data into it, statistical spatial data analysis with ArcGIS, location tracking. There are so many of these. So look at the year, the date. It shouldn't be too further. If you can get something from the past year, that's probably best, because it will likely be using the latest or nearly the latest version of the software. Look for something that has a very high number of views, and then just click on it and see where it goes. Skip around a little bit. If it seems interesting, start watching it. This is a 7-minute video. What do you have to lose? Okay, now it's time to try it out. Pause this video to give you time to search for a YouTube video that could help you in your learning. First, you're going to select one skill that you've targeted in your IDEP. This could be the same skill you used for the previous exercise or a different skill, up to you. Then go to YouTube and identify at least one interesting video for that skill that you've targeted and watch the first 2 minutes of it. Ask yourself if it may be valuable. Remember, when you're looking for a valuable video, you want to look at the date, the number of views, and the description to see if it's going to be useful for you. Then finally, share the video that you found with another learner on your team. And when you're ready, hit the play button to continue. We all use Google, but it's great to keep using Google when we're learning. You can use it for a mix of everything. Maybe it's for some small punctual learning. You need to just learn this one thing really quickly. Check it out on Google. Maybe it's for troubleshooting. All of this data manuals are online, and you can find them in Google. All sorts of other things. You can look at forums, guides. It might even send you back to a YouTube video or to a MOOC. Google will also help you with identifying even more resources. So the MOOC, the YouTube, anything else that might help you, go to Google. So I've looked through the TCB library, maybe I've looked at some videos, or maybe I'm just lost on where to start. So I go to Google, and let's say that I want to learn on skill U4. the ability to run and interpret basic tabulations or statistics using t-tests, ANOVA, etc. So I want to learn how to run an ANOVA test in Stata, and here Google is giving me some different videos to watch, 2 of which are from Stata Corp, the citation from the Stata manual that I can look through. It also gives me suggestions of other questions that have been asked. How do you run an ANOVA test? How do you analyze one-way ANOVA results? So here I can keep going through. Stata Help seems like it might be good from EDU is usually a school or a university. So these are all different resources that are coming to me from Google, and just like with YouTube and MOOCs, I need to be discerning, but I can try it out and see if it's useful for me. But just like YouTube, just like anything else I'm going to be using, I want to make sure that it's recent enough, that it has a lot of views. So maybe this is a very bad choice. You can continue to go through and look for things, and remember, you can always go back to the TCB library and see from the skill set if there are any skills, any different tools, such as the PMA qualitative folder in the Dropbox. You can look through all of these different resources in addition to Google to combine what the internet has to teach you and also what the PMA team and their documents and their specific ways of doing things using these skills. Now it's time to try it out. I know you've done a Google search before, but let's think about this Google search specifically in terms of the skills that you've targeted in your IDEP. So pause this video to give you time to Google search for resources that could help you in your learning. Start by selecting one skill that you've targeted in your IDEP. And again, this can be the same skill as the previous exercises or a different skill. Then go to Google and identify at least one interesting resource for your skill. Remember to be discerning. This isn't just any resource. Anyone can put something up on the web. You want something that is at your level, that comes from a credible source, and that seems like something that could help you to learn this skill. If your results seem not so useful, try either being more specific, adding in more terms about what you're looking for, or being more general. Maybe you're so specific that there aren't enough resources out there. So play around with the terms. Do you have the full term of the skill that you've targeted in your IDEP? Do you have just certain keywords? Play around with that until you get at least one interesting resource for your skill. And then finally, share this resource you found with another learner on your team. And when you've done that, hit the play button to continue. Remember that people are resources too. We tend to forget this, but in the IDEP, we have this entire section on what is the role of the whomever in the learning. What's the role of you, the learner? What's the role of your PI or supervisor? What's the role of your TU country lead? And what is the role of other learning support team members? So you have colleagues, you have other people who are learning this skill or who have learned it already who can support you. You might even have other colleagues, other travelers on learning trips who have gone to your same destination before, who have learned that skill. You can ask them for advice and maybe even support. Maybe you have a colleague who's going to that learning destination now who has the same or a similar skill that they would like to learn. Work with them. Ask them for advice on what they've done so far, on what resources they've used, on what's challenging for them. Ask them for support. Maybe take a course with them or share resources with them. Consider traveling together, as it may be, or at least checking in with them along the way. There's also your TU country leads. We have this in the in the PMA TCB library, we call them skills custodians. So skills custodians are TU country leads who are the point of contact for a different skill or skill set, like we saw in the TCB library review earlier. Ask a skills custodian for help with that skill. Maybe you feel like you don't have access to the right resources. Maybe you feel like you don't have enough resources. Reach out to that TU skills custodian for that skill and ask them for help. Maybe they'll have a resource for you. Maybe they can help troubleshoot with you directly or look over something you've been working on and give you feedback. Maybe they can't do either, but they probably at least know someone else who can, and they can help connect you with other people who have the skills or the resources you're looking for. This system of referrals, asking someone to help you and having them help at least to connect you to someone else, this system of referrals, it's a great system when we're learning. You are also the one who plans the first few miles. So remember these initial actions. What do you think are the first things you can do to start this learning? Where do you go outside of that driveway? Do you turn right or left? Do you go on the highway or the side road? Well, in the IDEP, we also look at the first steps to help you figure out what to do in these first few miles. I would highly suggest that you start your learning. You start learning that skill with one learning resource and one action step related to that learning resource. And to do this in the next 2 days, one of the hardest things with self-directed learning is getting started. So maybe you have that one YouTube video and you're going to watch it and try it out. Do it right then in the next 2 days. Once you try it, you'll have a clear idea of what your next few miles, of what your next few steps will look like as well. Also remember that it's up to you to manage yourself. You need to make time to learn, to check in. You also need to make time and opportunities to practice what you learn. So in terms of making time, maybe you want to set aside time each week for at least a little bit of this structured learning. Going through a lesson in the MOOC, watching a video, looking at something in the TCB library, getting a little further, going through that SOP. Put time for that maybe in your calendar so that you have that quick check-in every week and you don't just say, oh, my learning needs to wait for something else. Also, for practicing what you learn, you need to be proactive about this. How are you going to apply your learning? If you don't apply it, you're not going to know what you're learning and what you need to learn. You'll just be stuck in the theoretical. So search out ways to apply what you're learning so that you can better understand what you do and do not know. Try to apply this in a real-world situation, but also weigh the risk. If you're learning sampling, you probably don't want to be the one person who works on sampling for that new study and no one else looks at it, right? So think about the risk involved when you're applying it, but also know that you need to look for those opportunities. Help others help you look for those opportunities on how to apply what you're learning. You're going to need to monitor yourself as well, and we'll talk about this in a second with check-ins. It's up to you to monitor yourself. Ask yourself, are you progressing? Are you progressing enough? And finally, you're going to need to motivate yourself. This is the biggest struggle. With self-directed learning, you are the one motivating yourself. You are the one deciding what I'm learning now has value for my job, so I am going to do it. This motivation is going to be the huge struggle, up there with having time and making time for learning. Often learning with someone else, or at least having external check-ins with someone else to build this sense of accountability can be motivating, right? Think about what motivates you and try to build that in as much as possible in these first few miles so that you keep going with your self-directed learning. Remember that you are the one who decides when to check the map in self-directed learning. You're the one to ask yourself, how is it going so far? What can you improve? What's working well? What can you get more of? Are your learning goals still the most urgent, applicable, and feasible for what your work requires and what motivates you? If tomorrow everything becomes in-person trainings, I might stop learning about making videos because that is no longer the most urgent, most applicable, and most feasible for what my work requires. Checking in can come in many forms. Because this is self-directed learning, and because you are a person who can reflect on what you're learning and the value it has and how it's going, consider checking in with yourself. Again, maybe this goes on your calendar as well. Every week, every 2 weeks, you have just a little reminder on your calendar to check in with yourself, to look at your IDEP, to think about what you've learned that week, to think about struggles that you've had that week and what else you might need to learn to make the shifts and adaptations in your self-directed learning that you think will be valuable. Don't wait too long for this because you are learning about how best you learn as you go along. So make these little adjustments along the way. You can also request to schedule a check-in with your TU lead or another learner. Remember, you're driving the car, but you're not alone. So you can reach out to your TU lead and say, I'd like to check in about the learning so far. I'd like to check in about the process or the tools, about what I'm doing, about the struggles I might be having. You can request that. You also can request to hold an already determined check-in with your TU lead. Remember, as part of the TCB process, we have quarterly check-ins and annual reviews. You can tell your TU lead, I feel like it might be time for us to do that quarterly check-in, or maybe it's a little early or a little late for our annual review, but I think it would be useful at this point. Please. Remember that you are also the one who knows when you've arrived. It's up to you to drive this process of evaluation. Do you think you've reached your learning goal? And how do you know that? Would it be helpful to identify an external way of evaluating your skill level? And is that feasible? So we can't all get degrees in every little thing we're learning. I don't have a video making degree, and it doesn't make sense to get one. But I can do things to evaluate my learning, both by myself and with the help of others. So how can I evaluate myself? Well, remember in the IDEP, we have this column to help you plan means of evaluation, and you can talk with your TU country lead about that. There's also this great cycle. This is your evaluation cycle, if you'd like. So you're learning things, and as you're learning them, you're also applying them. Remember, the more you apply and reflect on how that application went, the better you understand to what extent you are mastering the skill and what you need to learn more of or get better at or shift. So look for these application opportunities and talk to others about helping you find them and offering them to you. If someone knows you're learning such a skill and they have an opportunity for you to apply it, they might offer that opportunity to you. So really search out those application opportunities. When it comes to evaluating this skill, you want to know that you're at the skill level you want to be at and that you need to be at. How are you going to do that? Well, you're going to reflect yourself. How did that application go? How am I feeling with using this in my work? You're also going to ask others for feedback. It helps when you ask for feedback from others who know about this skill. This could be your TU lead looking over something that you've done and saying, yes, you've improved. Here's where I think your skill level is at for this skill. It could be others you work with who have an understanding of the skill or who might even understand just more generally where things went well and where it was a bit more of a struggle. So ask for this feedback. Remember that we also talked about feasibility. So what are the feasible means of evaluation? And whenever you're in doubt about having an appropriate level in this skill, repeat a part of this process. Apply the skill again and evaluate it with the help of your own reflection and feedback from others. Remember that in self-directed learning, you are the one who decides when to keep going. This is not a class, this is not a tutoring engagement. This is your driving your learning, and a part of that is constant. So you decide if you should develop this skill even further, or maybe if you should shift to something else. Maybe there are other skills that are more urgent, more relevant, more motivating, things that you would like to focus on now that make more sense to focus on now. So instead of continuing on that same road, you're going to switch to another road and work on another skill. Maybe too, there's a new opportunity to learn something that wasn't there before. So just like the boot camp's coming up, there are certain skills that it makes sense to learn now in preparation for the boot camp. And once again, your journey keeps going. Your journey continues towards that learning destination, towards other learning destinations with your IDEP. So you want to adjust your IDEP as is necessary. Maybe it's during check-ins, maybe it's once you've arrived at a skill goal. Whenever it feels useful, adjust your IDEP. Maybe you're going from a different current capacity to a different targeted capacity on the same skill. Maybe you're working on another skill. Any combination that works for you because you are driving your learning in self-directed learning. So you set your learning goals. You can ask others for help. You identify resources and ask others to help you in identifying these resources. You set your initial actions, and maybe someone has ideas about what those might be, but you do them. You set the check-ins, be they with yourself or a request to check in with someone else, because that would be helpful for you at that point. You set the terms, the means of evaluation, and think about what is feasible and useful for you in evaluating that skill. You decide when to continue with that skill, when to shift to other skills. You drive your learning journey. So now it's time to take the wheel on your self-directed learning. I hope you have a great learning journey.